We are now at the letter H. So we are excited to find out who is going to represent the letter H.
There can only be, there can only be one. Bell Hooks.
Yes. Rest in peace, Bell Hooks.
The book in question is all about love. However, I have my whole shelf that's dedicated to Bell Hooks, if you want to see it.
Let's see it.
Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, only, because only they can sit together. They are my two Black feminist teachers that I love deeply.
Take your screenshots, people. You're only going to get this one.
So that's the Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde shelf. And the book all about love. And give you another story, and then I can.
Let's get into it.
The first person I ever dated, we started our relationship by discussing this book because we both happened to be reading it at the same time.
That is romantic as hell.
So this was like 20 years ago or whatever.
Wait, time out. Anyone listening, how to start a relationship 101.
Read a book about love.
It's all about love. Yeah. And then take it from there. Don't start at the movies. Don't start, with a dinner. Start with a book. Continue.
Yeah, so we were reading, actually, first of all, we met at a conference called Young Women Connect. So we're both Black women, feminists, whatever. And then after that, we just chat. Back in the day, it was like you're chatting over email. So we were chatting over email, and we were both reading the book. So we were discussing the book, and then
you just happened to both read it,
we happened coincidentally both reading the book at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
And then we went to when Bell Hooks died, if you saw Facebook, everybody has a story about this book. It really impacted a lot of people. Then I went to her house, and she had the most amazing bookshelf back then. So she was an inspiration for all of this, I have to say.
Yeah.
So we discussed the book, and there's two other people I dated that I've discussed this book with. So it's become this thing in my romantic life where yes, this is how Black lesbians roll. All about by Bell Hooks. But anyway. I love this book and I love Bell Hooks because amidst the many things, so she's the one, who created came up with a conceptual framework to describe society that that describes it perfectly. She is a prolific writer for real, since she was 19. Her first book was Ain't I a Woman? And she writes accessibly. So she's an academic who writes in a way that anybody can understand it. So you can just, everybody understands what she's saying. And she's written many books about love. She's written books about spirituality. She's written books about teaching. She's a teacher who loved teaching. So she's one of my inspirations for how to teach. And she's written a lot about Black people and self-esteem. A lot of the stuff about the interplay between the personal, the political, healing and oppression and society, all that stuff. So she's brilliant.
And children's books too. Children's books too.
And children's books, children's books about masculinity and how masculinity messes with men, all kinds of stuff. So this book, what I appreciate about it for me, and I have a creative visualization book, which is this book where I visualize what I want with my life. And
You gave it to me. I'm sorry. I have it.
I know. I gave it to you. So
I read it every year.
I hope you've written your book too, right? So a book where you do the activities. I had written meet Bell Hooks as one of my goals, or dreams, or crazy wild ideas. And so the same person I was talking about, the first person I dated. Yes. When Bell Hooks came to Toronto, she got to take her around the city. But I wasn't brave enough to be let me join that ride. Right. So I made a little zine and I gave it to her. So I kind of met Bell Hooks, but more importantly, I gave her a little zine of what she meant to me and what questions I had for her and stuff like that. And so that's my other Bell Hooks story. But what I like about this book is she is the first person that said love is not just a feeling. Love is not this ephemeral thing you feel. Like, love is an action. Love is an intention. Love is a choice. Love is a decision. Love is a practice. And so at a very good time for me, I was quite young, I got a very clear definition that like love is about, in romantic or other relationships, and I still follow that. So she coined this term, living by a love ethic, right? So choosing to live your life through a practice of love. But what is a practice of love? And a practice of love, according to her ideas, a lot of it is you can see the growth that somebody else needs and you support them to that. So it's a spiritual process. It's about seeing somebody's potential and supporting them intentionally through that. Whole chapter it's about honesty. It's about truthfulness. It's about being willing, again, you can quote James Baldwin and some other people, seeing the ways in which you've internalized really harmful ways of thinking, harmful ways of behaving, and consciously like working through that so that, you know, you don't do it to other people. So it's a practice of truthfulness with yourself, which then turns into a practice of truthfulness with somebody else. So for her, love isn't feel love. It's I do love. It's I do love. I love. It's an action. So I picked a couple of quotes that kind of touch on, you know, where we get our ideas about what love is, and, you know, how some of those things might not be helpful actually. And anyway, I can go Bell Hooks. I could talk about Bell Hooks for the rest of my life. So
first of all, I'm still over here just loving this idea of starting with Bell Hooks at a relationship. So we're in February. People are, you know, the love is in the air, as they say. But let's get into some of these quotes. I can't wait to hear the ones that you selected.
Yes, let me find them. It is everybody should read this for Valentine's Day.
Out of curiosity, you read this book and then you start a new fresh relationship. Does the book almost act as a guide? As a guide for your relationship?
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened.
Wow.
And then it became like I'm not to say my relationships didn't have a whole bunch of issues with them, which they obviously did, but but it was good. Like, it's actually so important to have those conversations. Like, it's really important to talk to your friends, your family, your partner about, like, what do you understand love to be about, right? Like, what does loving me look like? What does loving you look like, right? And then because it's not a feeling, it's how you relate to somebody, which takes a lot of choices. So
that is what you currently believe in today's world.
I believe that's love it. She defined love for me. She's had the most impact on my understanding of love of any author I've ever read, hands down.
Wow.
So I love her for that. So let me read this passage from All About Love.
Okay.
Okay. When we understand love as the will to nurture our own and another's spiritual growth, it becomes clear that we cannot claim to love if we are hurtful and abusive. Love and abuse cannot coexist. Abuse and neglect are by definition the opposites of nurturance and care. Often we hear of a man who beats his children and wife and then goes to the corner bar and passionately proclaims how much he loves them. If you talk to the wife on a good day, she may also insist he loves her, despite his violence. An overwhelming majority of us come from dysfunctional families, and I was talking about everybody in society, in which we were taught we were not okay, where we were shamed, verbally and or physically abused, and emotionally neglected, even as we were also taught to believe that we were loved. For most folks, it is just too threatening to embrace a definition of love that would no longer enable us to see love as present in our families. Too many of us need to cling to a notion of love that either makes abuse acceptable or at least makes it seem that whatever happened was not that bad. So that's one quote, and it's basically about how many of us, most of us living in the society, and this is like partly maybe why we are accepting of really abusive leaders, is abuse is so normalized in our society. It bleeds down to how our families interact with us, and So you confuse, it's like mixed up together, like people who we think love us who are also harmful to us. So it's hard to pull those things apart and say, actually, like, harm is not necessary. Love can just be a beautiful, like, it can just be the care, right? So, and the nurturance and the growth. So many people don't know how to love because their conception of love comes from being in environments where there's a lot of harm.
Wow. I mean, I'm speechless on this one just because I'm thinking about all the environments that certain people are in that really hinder them from experiencing love. What a crazy quote. Okay, that is Bell Hooks. You got another quote.
I know, I don't know how many quotes you want me to share. But I guess what she's also saying is, like, start from that recognition that much of what you learned about love is mixed up in abuse, not because your parents wanted to be abusive or harmful or whatever, but because they are in a social context. If you're coming from a place of war, if you're in a place where there's so much violence, which is every place, like Canada's like that, Vancouver's like that, no matter where you go, people are regularly, we're not living in a harmonious, happy world where everybody is treated well at work and everywhere else. No, we are constantly exposed to harm. Yeah. So it becomes so normal to us that, like, anyway, that we don't know how to, like, let go of that and behave differently. So she's saying first step is recognition that what your understanding of love is often embedded in a lot of harm. And then second step, which is this quote, commitment to truth-telling lays the groundwork for the openness and honesty that is the heartbeat of love. When we can see ourselves as we truly are and accept ourselves, we build the necessary foundation for self-love. We've all heard the maxim, if you do not love yourself, you'll be unable to love anyone else. It sounds good, yet more often than not, we feel some degree of confusion when we hear this statement. The confusion arises because most people who think they're not lovable have this perception because at some point in their lives, they were socialized to see themselves as unlovable by forces outside their control. We're not born knowing how to love anyone, either ourselves or somebody else. However, we are born able to respond to care. As we grow, we can give and receive attention, affection, and joy. Whether we learn how to love ourselves and others will depend on the presence of a loving environment.
Whew. Well, I know the question anyone's going to have is, what do you do when you're not born into a loving environment? What is the answer there? How do you establish that?
So, I mean, if I was going to quote like this therapist person, Alice Miller, on what the difference between people who kind of survive and become able to, like, love others and treat others well, like, you know, we all survive different shit. But some of us come out better than others.
Yeah.
Do that. And a lot of it is just having, so she talks about this concept of, like, one positive witness. So if you've had one person in your childhood that, like, and to be fair, even though our parents are abusive often, they're also loving too. So we're not just coming from environments of complete harm and neglect. But let's say you were, if there's one positive witness that can affirm a child's, like, beauty and being and love, that helps them to be like, oh, I am lovable. So it's one witness. Like, it could be a teacher, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend, it could be who knows. And that helps a lot of people survive. But once you're grown and you start to recognize, oh, this stuff's harmful, this is good, then the more you start to recognize what's harmful and what's not, you then make choices around, am I going to surround myself with people who affirm my being? Am I going to surround myself, am I going to stick to those people and let go of the others? And the whole letting go requires that piece of, I don't need that. That's no longer part of my definition of love, right?
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more you have, anyway, I don't know. It's different for different people, but
yeah,
I think there's always going to be at least somebody somewhere that treats you well. Not the whole world is not going to be universally hostile always, right? And so it's growing the seed of the moments of love, the relationships, the one person that gives you care. And like, yeah, I want more of that, you know?
That is entirely true. We've seen those stories. We've heard that from people before. There's always one person, like you said, be it the teacher, be it the cousin, be it the uncle, be it the aunt, the person at the bread store, whatever it is, there's always that one person that is loving you. And so, wow, that is a very, very true statement and powerful quote. Thank you so much for sharing about...
Gotta read the book, the whole book. Like, yeah.
The one book we recommend to everyone this February, fall in love with it, read it, pick it up. All about love. All about love. I mean, if you can't tell from the title.